Good evening, friends, and welcome to the 72nd program or class in this series of classes on the Baha'i faith. Tonight we are going to be discussing the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. This will be our second class on this remarkable work, the last major work of Baha'u'llah, which, as I said last class, functions in some regard as sort of a review of the entirety of Baha'u'llah's revelation, both in its allusion to his life and the major events of his life, but also in the fact that throughout he cites from his own works. So, as I said before, when I originally looked at the work, and it was one of the first works I've studied in any detail as a Baha'i, it occurred to me that it was sort of a summary of his life and work, sort of an anthology, if you will. And to be frank with you, in that regard, I didn't pay it as much attention as I should have, because as I also said in the first class on this book, once I started preparing the work for this class, I discovered entirely new work. Now, this isn't entirely new experience. Every time you read a work by Baha'u'llah, you discover in it what you need at the time, or what it resounds in your mind reverberates, if you will, with what you're going through at the time, and you see things that are relevant to your current circumstances. But what I found in the work and going through it in preparation for this was that it stands as a most great proof, in a sense. It's, of course, all of the works, all of the revelation of Baha'u'llah are proofs of his station, inasmuch as the word is the first proof of the manifestation, the utterances that he reveals. But what I'm referring to in the case of the Epistle to the Son of Wolf are very explicit proofs. And that's what we're going to look at tonight. And that is the last third of the work is almost entirely and explicitly dedicated to very specific proofs. So let me share my screen, and we'll begin looking at some slides with citations from the work that I think demonstrate not only the fact that it has these proofs, but what kind of proofs they are. So we begin with a passage that is, in a way, kind of prefatory to the proofs. On page 128, Baha'u'llah says, and remember, he said this so many times in so many works, particularly in his letters to luminaries, particularly governmental and religious leaders, "We have not entered any school, nor read any of your dissertations. Incline your ears to the words of this unlettered one." And of course, he means unlettered in the sense of any formal kind of teaching, and wherewith he summoneth you unto God, the ever abiding. Better is this for you than all the treasures of the earth, could ye but comprehend it. Now, the importance of this, as I've mentioned before, but as particularly relevant to the proofs, is that that itself is a proof that he can, as he says in the Law-i-Hikmat, if he wants to cite a passage from a work, the work will appear before him. So he didn't enter any school, and the fact that he cites all the proofs he's going to use in the last 30% of the book, pages 128 until the last page on 181, are from his own inspiration, if you will. He didn't memorize these, nor does he have at hand a library where he could research these things and put this together. And also remember, and this is proven by those who observed the process, the revelatory process, that he does not revise his works, that the revelation is a spontaneous event, and this is true with all of the manifestations. And so that itself is a proof that he does not revise his work, that these exquisite works emanate from his mind without revision and without prior preparation. So let's look at these proofs that he derived, again, not from anything he has read, but from his own inspiration. And we begin with a work in the title, forgive my mispronunciation, but Muballigh, which is a very well recited, or oft recited, well remembered portion of Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. That term means preacher or expounder, and it does sound like a sermon. And it begins with a series of questions posed in relation to prophecies, and they say, has this occurred? Has this prophecy been fulfilled? And then the speaker, the narrator, answers his own question. Yes, it has. And there are 18, at least to my counting, it's not authoritative, at least 18 specific prophecies that are fulfilled at the time Baha'u'llah has finished his revelation. They speak as prompted by their own devices and understand not. Among them are those who have said, and this is the beginning of this sequence, if you will, of the sermon. Have the verses been sent down? Say, yea, by him who is the Lord of heavens. And of course, the verses have been sent down. This itself is self-proving, isn't it? Because these are part of the verses. Hath the hour come? Nay, more, it hath passed by him who is the revealer of clear tokens. Now, most of these are allusions to prophecies in the Qur'an or else hadith. Nay, more, it hath passed by him who is the revealer of clear tokens. Verily, the inevitable is come. Again, citation from the Qur'an. And he, the true one, hath appeared with proof and testimony. The plain is closed, and mankind is sore vexed and fearful. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but there are a few more that I think are worth sharing. Earthquakes have broken loose, and the tribes have lamented for fear of God, the Lord of strength, the all-compelling. Say, the stunning trumpet blast hath loudly raised, and the day is God's, the one, the unconstrained. And of course, there are two trumpet blasts foretold in the Quran, and the first is the revelation of the Bab, and the second, the revelation of Baha'u'llah. Hath the catastrophe come to pass? Say, yea, by the Lord of Lords. Is the resurrection come? Nay, more. He who is the self-subsisting hath appeared with the kingdom of his signs. Seest thou men laid low? Yea, by my Lord, the exalted, the Most High. Have the three stumps been uprooted? Yea, more, the mountains have been scattered in dust by him, the Lord of attributes. They say, where is paradise? And where is hell? Say, the one is reunion with me, the other mine own self. So that goes on as a spectacularly beautiful series of questions and answers in which the various prophecies regarding the day of days, the ingathering, the judgment, and so on, all of the various allusions to the revelation of Baha'u'llah and the beginning of a new era in human history. So then we go to other proofs that Baha'u'llah cites. And we're going to look at some of these, but here's a list of some of the sources from Joel, from the Old Testament, the day of the Lord, from the Quran, the great announcement, from Jeremiah, great is that day, and it hath no equal. From David, who will bring me into the strong city, an allusion to Akká. From Isaiah, Get thee up into the high mountain, O Zion. And of course, the high mountain is probably an allusion to Mount Carmel. From a hadith, blessed is the man that migrated to Akká. And of course, this is a prophecy, we presume, about Baha'u'llah himself. And then from the book of Amos in the Old Testament, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. And this, as I say in the parentheses, is explicated in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf by Baha'u'llah. He cites what is the major source of proofs, the words and prophecies of the Bab. And so they are, again, this is not authoritative, but as I counted them going through in preparation for the class, I counted 42 different proofs that he cites. They're not all explicit proofs per se. Some are just allusions and citations and so on that are relevant, but most are proofs from the writings of the Bab. And we're going to look at some representative quotes of passages from these quotations. And likewise, he saith, better is it for thee to recite but one of the verses of him whom God shall make manifest, than to set down the whole of the bayan. For on that day, the one verse can save thee, whereas the entire bayan cannot save thee. Now, this is very important in relation to something that we have discussed many times before, and that is, particularly after the most great separation in Adrianople, but even before then, Baha'u'llah alludes to the people of the bayan as those who are Babis but have not recognized the one that the Bab prophesied. So it's almost always used in a derogatory tone or a pejorative tone on the part of Baha'u'llah. You who are followers of the bayan, even though here is a quote from the Bab saying, in the day of him whom God shall make manifest, you should follow his writings, not the bayan. Say, O people of the bayan, and here again you'll get a better sense of what I was trying to explain about the pejorative tone of this address or this appellation, this epithet. O people of the bayan, be fair, and again, be fair, be fair. Be ye not of them who have made mention of the manifestation of the cause of God in the daytime and in the night season, and who, when he through his grace appeared, and when the horizon of revelation was illumined, pronounced against him such a judgment as hath provoked the lamentations of the inmates of the kingdom and of the realm of glory, and of such as have circled about the will of God, the all-knowing. And likewise he saith, and again the Bab saith, suffer not yourselves to be shut out as by a veil from God after he hath revealed himself. For all that hath been exalted in the bayan is but as a ring upon my hand, and I myself am verily but a ring upon the hand of him whom God shall make manifest. So this shows the Bab's own recognition of the importance of Baha'u'llah and his own sacrifice for the advent of that revelation, and his own humility before Baha'u'llah. Glorified be his mention. He turneth it as he pleaseth, the ring. He turneth it as he pleases. For whatsoever he pleaseth, and through whatsoever he pleaseth. Excuse me, let me read that again. For whatsoever he pleaseth, and through whatsoever he pleaseth, he verily is the help in peril, the Most High. And then there's an interesting proof in comparing the Bab to John the Baptist, something, of course, most people familiar at all with the Baha'i teachings know that there's this very wonderful parallel between the prophethood of John the Baptist, a manifestation in his own right, as I understand it, who foretold the coming of Christ, and of course, who baptized Christ. And so one of his proofs is the comparison of the Bab to, or rather the Bab's comparison of himself to John the Baptist. Likewise, refuting certain disbelievers, he, the Bab, this is Baha'u'llah talking about something the Bab said, saith, for none knoweth the time of the revelation except God. Whenever it appeareth, all must acknowledge the point of truth and render thanks unto God. They that have turned aside from me have spoken even as the followers of John the Baptist spoke. For they too protested against him who was the Spirit, Jesus, saying, the dispensation of John hath not yet ended. Wherefore hast thou come? In other words, the religion of John the Baptist has just started. You're coming too early. How can this be true? So those who were still following the Bab after the Baha'u'llah had pronounced and proven his station are in effect committing the same sin. Now too they that have repudiated us, though they have never known us and have been at all times ignorant of the fundamentals of this cause, knowing not from whom it proceeded or what it signifieth, have spoken that which hath made all created things to sigh and lament by my life. And of course, more explicitly, as he will say later, he's referring to the Azalis, the follower of Subi Azal, or through Mirza Yahya. He continues with this comparison. The mute can never confront the one who incarnateth in himself the kingdom of utterance. Fear God, O people, and peruse then that which hath been sent down with the truth in the 8th chapter of the 6th Vahid of the Bayan, and be not of such as have turned aside. He likewise hath commanded, once every 19 days this chapter should be read, that haply they may not be veiled in the time of the revelation of him whom God shall make manifest, by considerations foreign to the verses which have been and are still the weightiest of all proofs and testimonies. Let me have a sip of tea. Continuing with this same, now you see we're on page 156 now, continuing with this comparison to John the Baptist. John, son of Zacharias, said, what my forerunner hath said, saying, repent ye. Now, this is Baha'u'llah saying, citing the event where John the Baptist said what the Bab had said, saying, repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I indeed baptize you with water unto repentance, but he that cometh after me is mightier than I, whose shoes I am not worthy to bear. Therefore, wherefore hath my forerunner, as a sign of submissiveness and humility, said, the whole of the Bayan is only a leaf amongst the leaves in his paradise. And likewise he saith, I am the first to adore him and pride myself on my kinship with him. Now, we switch to another proof, and I talked about this last time. There are two nominatives of direct address in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. The main one, of course, is the Son of the Wolf. The second occurs on page 163, or begins there, where he addresses Hadi, Mirza Hadi Dawlat Abadi, a noted divine from Isfahan who became a prominent follower of Mirza Yahya, and later, as we read last time, was identified as his successor, because remember at this point, Mirza Yahya is in seclusion in Cyprus, where he was exiled at the same time Baha'u'llah was exiled to Akká, and thus has no effective following or influence. Every one of this people well knoweth that Sayyid Muhammad, we're talking about Sayyid Muhammad of Isfahan, who was the one who incited the desire in, or excited, if you will, the desire in Mirza Yahya to replace Baha'u'llah as the successor of the Bab, as him whom God will make manifest, and did indeed make such a claim at the instigation of Sayyid Muhammad. So it is, as we've said before, Sayyid Muhammad of Isfahan, who is considered the so-called Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation. In the days when, as requested by the Imperial Ottoman government, we proceeded to their capital, to Constantinople, he accompanied us. Now, this is a very interesting story. This is sort of the beginning of how grievous and explicit is the rebellion and subterfuge of Mirza Yahya, although there are many, many examples. But this particular one is very pointedly emphasized in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. So listen to this narrative of what took place. Subsequently, he committed that which, I swear by God, hath caused the pen of the Most High to weep and his tablet to groan. We therefore cast him out, whereupon he joined Mirza Yahya, this is Sayyid Muhammad of Isfahan, and did what no tyrant hath ever done. We abandoned him and said unto him, Be gone, O heedless one. After these words had been uttered, he joined the order of the Malavis, and had remained in their company until the time when we were summoned to depart. You know, they are religious leaders in Islam. Why does he pay so much heed to and plead with the recalcitrant ones whom Baha'u'llah knows will not change and are essentially beyond hope? Now, this is my writing, my question. I'm asking rhetorically, why does Baha'u'llah bother to plead with people like the Son of the Wolf and like Hadi, when he knows they're, of course, he foreknows as a manifestation, but just any individual among his followers would probably be able to assert the same thing, that there's no chance they're going to change their minds. Why do you keep, in effect, reasoning with them? Well, of course, the reasoning, the proofs, if you will, that he provides them is really not for them, but for us, I mean, ultimately. Answer: to demonstrate that no one is beyond salvation and change, and therefore no one is inherently evil, but suffer the consequences of their own freely made choices. Therefore, the fear of God, something we talked about several classes ago at length in our Q&A, is the fear that we will reject his clear guidance. This is just one explanation of this concept, but it's a very important concept. The fear of God, as we said in our discussion, is really more dealing with the respect for God, or the respect of the consequences of the fact that when we break the laws of God, we break ourselves on the law of God because they remain inviolable. The laws do. So once again, he mentions the 100 books. We mentioned this last time as a proof that earlier in the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, he mentions that one of the proofs are, of course, the revelation itself, that he has revealed, again, without editing, without revision, without prior consideration, 100 books. Of course, more than that, but at least that many. And here's where he mentions it again on page 164. Apprehend now the cry of him who is the point, is raised by his utterance. He supplicateth God that if there should appear from this tree, and this is the lote tree, which is his blessed self, any fruit or leaf or branch that would fail to believe him, God should cut it off forthwith. And likewise he, and this is the Bab, he saith, should anyone make a statement and fail to support it by any proof, reject him not. And yet now, though supported by 100 books, thou hast rejected him and rejoicest therein. And here is the story I was just alluding to about Mirza Yahya that I find particularly interesting. We mentioned it when we were talking about Baha'u'llah's exile from Baghdad, as he left Baghdad to go on the with the caravan of 100 days or so to get to Samsun and then on to Constantinople. He had, well, let me just read this because he tells the whole story here. We especially pointed certain ones to collect the writings of the primal point, the Bab. When this was accomplished, we summoned Mirza Yahya and Mirza Khurasani, known as Mirza Java, to meet in a certain place. Conforming with our instructions, they completed the task of transcribing 2 copies of the work of the primal point. I swear by God, this wronged one, by reason of his constant association with men, hath not looked at these books, nor gazed with outward eyes on these writings. When we departed, these writings were in the possession of these 2 persons. It was agreed that Mirza Yahya should be entrusted with them and proceed to Persia and disseminate them throughout that land. So this was an explicit charge for Mirza Yahya by his brother, the manifestation. Here's what you should do. Now notice the contrast, those of you who are familiar with the Tablet of Ahmad in our earlier discussion of that work, where Ahmad, though in the Tablet of Ahmad, immediately sensed that it was his duty to go back to Persia, even though he was less than a day's travel from attaining the presence of Baha'u'llah. When he just sensed that, oh, this is what this means, that I must follow the guidance of the Bab, to whose command we all are turning, and go back to Persia and explain that him whom God will make manifest has appeared. Well, here, Mirza Yahya is explicitly told to do this and to take these writings and have them copied and recopied and spread among the faithful, because they prove the succession of to the Babi faith by Baha'u'llah. This wrong one proceeded at the request of the ministers of the Ottoman Empire to their capital, to Constantinople. When we arrived at Mosul, we found that Mirza Yahya had left before us for that city and was awaiting us there. Briefly, the books and writings were left in Baghdad, while he himself proceeded to Constantinople and joined these servants. God beareth now witness unto the things which have touched this wrong one. For after we had so arduously striven, he, Mirza Yahya, abandoned the writings and joined the exiles. This wronged one was for a long period overwhelmed by infinite sorrows until such time when, in pursuance of measures of which none but the one true God is aware, we dispatched the writings into another place and another country, owing to the fact that in Iraq all documents must every month be carefully examined, lest they rot and perish. God, however, preserved them and sent them into a place which he had previously ordained. He verily is the protector, the successor. So a rather remarkable story, and here's the end of it. Wherever this wrong one went, Mirza Yahya followed him. Thou art thyself a witness, and well knowest that whatever hath been said is the truth. The Sayyid of Isfahan, this is the instigator again of Mirza Yahya, surreptitiously duped him. They committed that which caused the greatest consternation. Would that thou wouldst inquire from the officials of the government concerning the conduct of Mirza Yahya in that land. Aside from all this, I abjure thee by God, the one, the incomparable, the Lord of strength, the most powerful, to carefully look into the communications addressed in his name to the primal point, that thou mayest behold the evidences of him who is the truth, as clear as the sun. So another note, and this is my own writing. Again, these proofs are written to Mirza Hadi Dawlat Abadi. So he is talking again to Hadi at this point. But it is intended, as I believe, for all believers and historians. And he utilizes these opportunities, Baha'u'llah does, rather than write a defense or an apologia that stands alone. And again, this is my own emotional response to this strategy on the part of Baha'u'llah. Strategically, this is masterful that he does this. I think it is obvious why. He then describes the behavior of his sister, I think, as I said before, I think that's Miriam. I need to research that. I forgot to. With regard to tablets, and then to the one betrothed to Abdu'l-Bahá is another proof of what was done to Baha'u'llah and what he had to endure from his own family. It must be evident, therefore, how intense was the grief which this act inflicted upon this wronged one. He's talking about an act of Miriam. Later on, she threw her in her lot with Mirza Yahya. Now, the act he's talking about is the act of taking the woman who was intended to be the bride of Abdu'l-Bahá, of course, presuming he agreed, and withdrew her and hid her so that this could not take place. We beseech God, blessed and glorified by he, to cause her to turn unto him and aid her to repent before the door of his grace. He verily is the mighty, the forgiving, and he is in truth the all-powerful, the partner. So next here again, I'm re-emphasizing the proximity in time of the revelation of Baha'u'llah to that of the Bab, which is, we've already mentioned, Baha'u'llah likens it to the revelation of Christ following that of John the Baptist. And this makes clear why the people of the Bayan is a term that is pejorative. Because when I've given a number of talks about this, and I know a lot of people think, well, the people of the Bayan were the Babis, how could they be faithless, or why would he talk in a pejorative manner about this term? And of course, this explains why. Were he to appear at this very moment, I would be the first to adore him, the first to and the first to bow down before him. Be fair, O people. The purpose of the most exalted one, the Bab, was to ensure that the proximity of the revelation should not withhold men from the divine and everlasting law, even as the companions of John the Baptist were prevented from acknowledging him who is the Spirit, Jesus. Time and again he hath said, suffer not the Bayan and all that hath been revealed therein to withhold you from that essence of being and Lord of the visible and invisible. Should anyone consider this binding injunction, cling unto the Bayan. I've already said this before, but here's the quote from the Bab. Cling to the Bayan, such a one hath verily passed out of the shadow of the blessed and the exalted tree. Be fair, O people, and be not of them, of the heedless. So in other words, this is where the Bab explicitly talks about the fact that the end of the injunction, where Baha'u'llah talks about the injunction of the Bab, that don't let the Bayan become a barrier between you and recognizing the revelation of the next laws and the next revelation. Of course, the Bayan, the specific work, is the book of laws, but the Bayan also, as we said, in general means the utterances and so on, is alluding to the entire revelation of the Bab. Or at least that's my understanding. Succession of further proofs from the Bab continue. Likewise, he saith unto the letters of the living, to the letter of the living, Muballigh, upon him be the glory of God and his loving kindness. And this is Baha'u'llah quoting what Baha'u'llah said to Muballigh. Haply thou mayest in 8 years, in the day of his revelation, attain unto his presence, meaning he would be able to recognize and see Baha'u'llah, and he did. He was able to. The story of Dayan, who was murdered in Baghdad by the Azalis, by the follower of Mirza Yahya. goes on to cite other believers who were martyred by the decrees pronounced by Mirza Yahya. And Dayan also attained our presence, says Baha'u'llah. This is just a summary. This isn't a quote from the work. So this is incredible, and this is something I had not realized or forgotten about if I did, and that was that Mirza Yahya was responsible, and his followers, for having some of the stalwart believers of Baha'u'llah murdered. Well, again, we could go into as much detail. It would take us a full several classes to go over all of the 42 citations from the Bab and all the other proofs. But I wanted to conclude with the way the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf concludes in the last several pages, where these are proofs from hadith, from traditions about the ascendancy of Akká and its destiny. So here's the first one, page 177. Abdul-Aziz, son of Abdul-Salam, hath related unto us that the prophet, may the blessings of God and his salutations be upon him, hath said, Akká is a city in Syria to which God hath shown his special mercy. Now notice these are from particular imams. Not all of the hadiths, most of the major ones are from the imams. I bring you tidings of a city betwixt two mountains in Syria, in the middle of a meadow which is called Akká. Verily he that entereth therein, longing for it, and eager to visit it, God will forgive his sins, both of the past and the future. And he that departeth from it other than as a pilgrim, God will not bless his departure. In it is a spring called the spring of the cow. Whoso drinketh a draught therefrom, God will fill his heart with light and will protect him from the most great terror on the day of resurrection. And there is such a spring, and it is in Akká. By the shore of the sea is a city, suspended beneath the throne and named Akká. He that dwelleth therein, firm and expecting a reward from God, exalted be he. God will write down for him until the day of resurrection the recompense of such as have been patient and have stood up and knelt down and prostrated themselves before him. Fourth tradition. I announce unto you a city on the shores of the sea, white, whose whiteness is pleasing unto God, exalted be he. It is called Akká. He that hath been bitten by one of its fleas is better in the estimation of God than he who hath received a grievous blow in the path of God. And he that raiseth therein the call to prayer, his voice will be lifted up into paradise. And that he that remaineth there for 7 days in the face of the enemy, God will gather him with, I forget how you pronounce this, Khazir, I think it is. I didn't put the underline under the KH and the D also. Peace be upon him. There's a tradition about him, and it's a long story, very interesting in the Qur'an. And God will protect him from the most great terror on the day of resurrection. And he, may the blessings of God, exalted be he, and his salutations be upon him, hath said, there are kings and princes in paradise. The poor of Akká are the kings of paradise and the princes thereof. A month in Akká is better than 1,000 years elsewhere. Number 5. Blessed the man that hath visited Akká, and blessed he that hath visited the visitor of Akká. And of course, this would be Baha'u'llah. Blessed the one that hath drunk from the spring of the cow, and washed in its waters. For the black-eyed damsels quaff the camphor in paradise, which hath come from the spring of the cow, and from the spring of Savan, and the well of Zamzam. Well is it with him that hath drunk from these springs and washed in their waters, for God hath forbidden the fire of hell to touch him and his body on the day of resurrection. 6. The prophet, may the blessings of God and salutations be upon him, is stated to have said, in Akká are works of supererogation and acts which are beneficial, which God vouchsafes, specially unto whomsoever he pleaseth. And he saith in Akká, glorified be God, and praise be unto him. And there is none other God but God, the most great, and most great is God. And there is no power nor strength except in God, the exalted, the mighty. God will write down for him 1,000 good deeds and blot out from him 1,000 evil deeds, and will uplift him 1,000 grades in paradise, and will forgive him his transgression. And whoso saith in Akká, I beg forgiveness of God, God will forgive him on all his trespasses. And he that remembereth God in Akká at morn and at eventide, in the night season and at dawn, is better in the sight of God than he who beareth swords, spears, and arms in the path of God. Exalted be he. So that was a hadith from Muhammad. The Apostle of God. This is another hadith from Muhammad. Again, a tradition means that words that someone wrote down that Muhammad said, but they're not part of the Qur'an when he was in the revelatory state. This doesn't mean they are not valid quotations from Muhammad, nor do the Muslims deny that they are. The Apostle of God, may blessings of God and his salutations be upon him, hath also said, he that looketh upon the sea at eventide and saith, God is most great, at sunset, God will forgive his sins, though they be heaped as piles of sand. And he that counteth 40 waves while repeating, God is most great, and that would be Allahu Akbar in the original, or Allahu Bahá in the Baha'i writings. Exalted be he, God will forgive his sins, both past and future. And then the last one, the Apostle of God, and this is another hadith from Muhammad. May the blessings of God and his salutations be upon him, hath said, he that looketh upon the sea a full night is better than he who passeth 2 whole months betwixt Rukn and Maqam. And he that hath been brought up on the shores of the sea is better than he that hath been brought up elsewhere. And he that lieth on the shore is as he that standeth elsewhere. So that's the end of my formal presentation. I hope it was worthwhile or useful. In next class, we will, in 2 weeks, discuss the final 2 works of Baha'u'llah that form such an important part of the covenant of Baha'u'llah, and that is the Law-i Carmel, the Tablet of Carmel, and the Kitab-i the Book of My Covenant, or the Book of the Covenant of Baha'u'llah. Thank you.